Welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. Hey, if you have not signed up for Bulwark Plus, I would strongly encourage you to do it. There's a lot going on. You know, a lot of people wondered, what would you guys at the Bulwark do after the election if Trump is defeated, being a never Trump site? Well, I think that's pretty clear. I think we have our mission statement handed to us, pushing back against the crazy pretty much forever. Well, if you had signed up for Bulwark Plus before last night, you would have had a chance to be on our live stream where we were discussing an unusually crazy day, the dumbest coup, and the completely insane press conference with Rudy Giuliani. One of our listeners, though, gave me the theme for my newsletter this morning. A clown with a flamethrower still has a flamethrower. These are deep thoughts. So joining me for our weekend podcast is Tim Miller, who actually endured the whole Rudy, whatever you want to call that, yesterday. You sat through that thing, didn't you?
I'm going to come clean for the podcast listeners. I did not endure the entire thing. I fought against this. I fought against it, Charlie. I didn't want to. I saw a couple tweets come across my stream about how Rudy quoted my cousin Vinny. Yeah. And I was like, oh, do I have to watch this? Then I saw a couple more tweets. And then after about 10 minutes, I was like, I guess we have to watch this. This is just the state of where we're at in our country right now. And it's important that somebody is putting this into context for folks. So I suffered through, 80 minutes of the 90. Okay, so I think that's pretty good.
That's 80 more minutes than I did. I went back on YouTube and I probably should clock myself. I can only listen to, say, Sidney Powell for about 35 seconds before my head starts to become incandescent. Here's what I wrote this morning, and you tell me whether you agree that the number one, Trump's attempts to overturn the election are clownish and absurd, but they're also profoundly dangerous and un-American. And you had a great piece where you talk about the absolutely insane and un-American press conference yesterday. But this is one of those moments where how alarmed should we be? And I'm going back to the sort of the Bill Kristol, I am alarmed kind of thing, that it is absurd at the same time. And it is absurd. It is the clown, but the clown has a flamethrower, and he can burn the house down. So,
yeah, I agree. I think we spend this. There's this time that is spent discussing, like, how alarmed should we be? Should we be concerned? Is a coup happening? Is this just a bunch of idiots running around with juggling flamethrowers? And like the answer is like both, all right. Yeah. We can look at this clearly and recognize that this is something that is almost certainly not going to succeed, right? Yeah. That Joe Biden will have his hand on the Bible January 20th. He will fumigate the White House, and he will enter it at some point after the fumigation is complete. Like, that is going to happen. But at the same time, there are all other threats to our polity that are at play here, right? And to have the president of the United States' attorney comparing our democracy to Venezuela, saying that our voting machines were corrupted in the same way that tin pot caudillos in Venezuela and Cuba and other Latin American companies corrupt their vote counting machines in order to rig elections for victory to the party that pays more money. And that is a very serious claim. There are all these downstream negative effects if you have half of the country thinking that their vote doesn't matter. Right? And so it makes it in all these future instances, it makes people less interested in respecting our democratic norms. It makes you less interested in respecting our institutions because they do not believe that they are legitimate. And so, even Marco, I saw this going around. Marco Rubio wrote about this in an op-ed where he was attacking the left over not taking Trump's, not calling Trump legitimate when, President Obama met with Donald Trump 2 days after the election or whatever. It was a stupid criticism back then, but he recognized this. Like, this was not This is not like crazy talk. This is something that had widespread agreement across our politics, like 2 months ago.
Well, the other thing though is going back to the Russian interference, the goal, Vladimir Putin's goal was to sow confusion, to raise doubts about our democratic process, and I don't know whether there was much Russian interference this year, but it didn't have to be because it's all coming from the president of the United
Yeah.
States.
Look,
So
here's what Marco said just really quick on
yeah,
this point. I pulled it up. Like, the biggest achievement that any adversary has ever scored against us in an election cycle is to bring us to the point where people honestly believe that the person who's going to be sworn in was not validly and
right.
legitimately elected. Like, that's what Marco wrote 4 years ago. That is exactly what the current sitting president of the United States is doing right this second. So it can be both ridiculous and serious at the same time. It can be both clownish and absurd, and also something to be concerned about.
Yeah, and I think I want to get to the absurdity of what was said yesterday because there's no evidence for it whatsoever. I mean, it is a debunked conspiracy theory. People need to remember that the Trump campaign is on a massive legal losing streak. Every time they go into court, they lose and they back off from their allegations of fraud. But I mean, you use the word un-American, and I think it's worthwhile just stepping back for a moment because we have been criticizing Donald Trump for 4 years. I mean, right? I do feel that there is a dark vindication for Never Trumpers that everything we're seeing now is the culmination of what we have been saying would happen if you put Donald Trump in the White House. But I mean, you think about what he's doing right now. I mean, he's not merely the worst sore loser in the history of America. I mean, he's gone AWOL on his most basic duties. He's not even doing his job. He's not protecting the country, and and this is while he's abdicating his responsibilities, he is quite literally, openly trying to orchestrate a raw authoritarian scheme to overturn a democratic election by getting the legislatures to basically ignoring the popular vote, which is breathtaking. And he's also in the process of sabotaging the nation's war against the pandemic by refusing to go ahead with the transition. So he's childish, he's reckless, it's absurd, but it's deadly all at the same time. If only
Yeah.
America had been warned.
Yeah, I used the word un-American. I stand by that.
Yeah,
Stuart Stevens used the word on MSNBC the other night, seditious, which I think it is. It is sowing, an attempt at rebellion against the duly elected president-elect in Joe Biden. And look, I mean, again, this is something that we all could have, that all Republicans would have clearly recognized as un-American just a short time ago, right? I mean, the idea that a president of the United States would compare our democratic system to China's and Venezuela's and
yeah.
Cuba's and say that it's indistinguishable. I mean, remember the whole Obama apology tour thing, where it was this was all Fox News talked about for months and months, was how un-American and how he trashed our country by apologizing for some of America's past indiscretions in foreign policy. Donald Trump is attacking us now, is saying that America is as bad as dictators now, right? And so this is the other article I wrote recently, which is all of these Republican senators, all these Republican candidates have become what they used to claim to hate. They're all sore
They have.
losers and crybabies and un-American.
So we wake up this morning to this headline in the Washington Post. Trump uses power of presidency to try to overturn the election and stay in office. President Trump is using the power of his office to try to reverse the results of the election, orchestrating a far-reaching pressure campaign to persuade Republican officials in Michigan, Georgia, and elsewhere, probably including Wisconsin, to overturn the will of voters in what critics decried Thursday as an unprecedented subversion of democracy. So this may be a dumb coup, but I will tell you it is too coup-like for complacency. And we are in an area of American history where we're off the map. We've kind of we've run off. It's like the tanks have been going too fast, and we are in completely uncharted territory of American history. And it almost seems redundant to say that none of this would be happening if Republicans would have stood up to Donald Trump, if they would have recognized Joe Biden's victory the day after the election, if they had taken the easy off ramp, we would not be where we are today. And the only reason that this has the remotest chance of success is the question mark. Will Republicans go along with him? And as of right now, we had a good statement, I thought, from Mitt Romney. Good statement from Ben Sass. Horribly wimpy statement from Lamar Alexander. But right now, the Republican Party, and I feel like we've said this a million times, Tim, the Republican Party's acquiescence to Donald Trump is not cost-free. And this crisis is, yes, Donald Trump is the proximate cause, but this is inconceivable if the Republican Party did not wink and, have that muscle memory of cravenness.
Yeah, I mean, it was cost free to them. And this is the downside of what happened to the election, and what I think vindicates the people who are on the burn it down side of this debate is that they don't feel like were held responsible at all for their enabling of Trump, because they weren't other Republican elected officials. And so I think that explains a big reason why they're continuing to behave like this. But I want to underscore your point, because I think that there's maybe a lack of appreciation for this. They could end this.
Yeah,
right. Like they could end this if Mitch McConnell and other Republican senators and governors from across the country, and Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and Brian Kemp had jointly spoke out and said, yeah, our democracy and our elections are more important than pampering Donald Trump's feelings. Like, he lost this election. We're grateful for his blah, blah, blah as president of the United States, and he did all the blah, blah, blah. And they can suck up to him all they want. But to have a clear statement that this is over, Joe Biden is the president-elect, and it's time to start this transition. The Senate has the power to, force, the GSA and some of these, some of the intelligence briefings to begin. We could resolve not all of the crisis, because Trump and OAN and Newsmax and blah 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 would still continue, but this would be largely resolved if they just said enough right now, and they refuse.
Well, and these Michigan officials, instead of with their tail between their legs going and answering the president's summons to go to the White House, could have said, "No, Mr. President, we have work to do here at home. We are not going to be involved in this. We are not going to be participants in overturning this election." Now, I think today is potentially quite decisive in terms of what happens over the next couple of months. These two leaders from Michigan have said in the past very, very clearly that they did not think they had the legal authority to throw out the election and name the electors, that they weren't going to be doing it. So, are they going to be browbeaten into changing their mind? Are they going to say, well, we're just asking questions? Because if they come out of that meeting tonight and suggest that maybe they're open to participating in this legislative coup, then, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war.
I think it's important to say their name. So Lee Chatfield is the Speaker of the House in Michigan. He's also, I think, the head, I don't know what his exact title is, president, chairman of the RSLC, which is the Republican State Leadership Committee. It's like the NRCC, but for state house campaigns across the country. It's a 34-year-old guy. Wants to have a future in politics, is a striver, an up-and-comer, but was like a Romney supporter. This is not a far, a populist Tea Party, Louis Gohmert type figure. This is a big moment for somebody like that, because the Michigan election was not close. I mean, This was a 3-point victory. Joe Biden won the Michigan election by 10 times more than Donald Trump won it by in 2016. So, the senator who got kind of a harangued in the airport today, I know less about him, and is I think potentially a less ripe target for this. But if only one of these two chambers in Michigan says that they will accept the electors based on the vote, then it's over. So this is, again, kind of like our Secretary of State in Georgia. This is a good sign for our system of checks and balances, that we have dispersed power. Like that is, good. But it shouldn't come down to these random state officials, but unfortunately it is. And hopefully Lee Chatfield will do the right thing. And if not, he should be held to account.
And the other guy from the Senate, who's also going, was up there. I just saw a picture of him on the stage during the anti-mask rallies with one of the guys who's been indicted for the plot to kidnap and murder the Democratic governor of Michigan. So this is going to be a decisive moment.
Less hopeful then. We're less hopeful for the
less
Senate.
hopeful for them. Well, in case there's any doubt about all of this, it is extraordinary how open the Trump lawyers are, and I want to talk about who these Trump lawyers are in a moment. But Sidney Powell being second only to Rudy Giuliani in pure egregiousness, went on the Lou Dobbs show last night.
I'd
And
like to call it a tie. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm
okay,
not going to give her second
that's
place.
fair. Well, at least she didn't have the hair dye, rolling down her face during it. So maybe, but so she goes on Lou Dobbs, and this is her plan. Let's play Sidney Powell from Lou Dobbs last night.
The entire election, frankly, in all the swing states should be overturned, and the legislatures should make sure that the electors are selected for Trump, and it's going to have to follow the constitutional provisions that it be decided according to the amendment. It's just
let's.
Okay, so I mean, bleep me here. There's like, yeah, in all the swing states, she has not been able to prove a single act of fraud in any court of law anywhere in America. But she's on saying, yeah, I think that the legislature should basically disenfranchise all those millions of people and do this. Look, I think everybody needs to take a deep breath here, because this would be unprecedented, potentially illegal strategy to do this. No state has ever done this kind of thing. There's been some explainers that are pretty good about this. The constitutions do say that states get to decide how to allocate their electors. But the legislatures have already decided they're going to let the voters decide, choose the electors. Now, lawmakers apparently can change that, but they would have to do it before the election, not after the election. So most legal experts are saying, yeah, there's no real role for the legislature. And in a place like Michigan, it will be up to the governor to certify the electors. But we're getting to the point where the fevered fantasy of the Trumpist right wing will be to have two competing sets of electors sent to Congress, and that we might actually have a fight on January 6th. I mean, what is the end game, do you think, here? What does Donald Trump really think is going to happen?
Well, so before I get to the end game, I want to make one point, which is, man, are we lucky that Joe Biden won this thing clearly?
Oh yeah, yes,
really because I was one of the disaster scenarios that I was worried about, which we might have talked about on this podcast before the election, was in a case like Pennsylvania, where they had that disputed, if you mailed your ballot on a certain day, but it came in late, like whether to count it. And like, let's say that Pennsylvania was a hinge state, and that these ballots were determinative. That's a situation where I think we really might have had competing slates of electors. And I think surely you look at this now, and obviously the Republicans would have gone along with it, and there would have been a legitimate effort to steal this election that had a chance of succeeding. So thank Dominion that we didn't have that. But as far as what the end game is, Jonathan Last on the Next Level podcast for the Bulwark Plus subscribers said something. I hope he writes about this, because he made a great point, which is that I don't know that there isn't a legal end game, but the political end game, the political game played, has been very successful. And what it has done is it has continued to bind this Republican Party tighter and tighter to Donald Trump, as his son tries to think about taking over the RNC, and as his daughter-in-law wants to run for Senate in North Carolina, and as he contemplates and teases a run in 2024. He's putting the clamps down on all of these people and making this a litmus test. And so how that game plays out, I'm still a little unclear between, say, mid-December when this thing is certified, and the Georgia vote in January 5th, and then the inauguration January 20th. I think that is going to be a intriguing 3-week period. But I don't think they have any real end game for actually flipping the election.
But the damage can be very real. No, I think that is true. Although one of the questions that I do have here is that, and bear with me for a moment, because I don't think there's any evidence of any sort of dysfunction or significant fraud. if there were legitimate questions out there about the way the votes were counted, the way they were cast, the way they were processed, doesn't things like what happened yesterday undermine them? Coming out with these batshit crazy things about George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, China, Cuba, Venezuela, programmed rigged election machines. I mean, doesn't that undermine even the possibility that there are legitimate questions that can be raised?
I don't. Are they thinking about that? I mean, maybe there are one or two people on the campaign who are sniffing their own farts and thought that they had a serious fraud claim, and like Rudy Giuliani with his bloated, wiping a snot all over his face, ridiculous visage is like is overstepping them, and they're grumpy about it. Yeah, but like there wasn't any. Maybe there are a couple cases here and there. Maybe there are 10 cases of fraud, or 100 in a state. I mean, he won all these states by 5, 10, 15, 20. In Michigan's case, 150,000 votes.
Well, I think that what you are seeing is a little bit of a crack up from Trump world. I think that there is a division. I think that there are people in Trump world who are looking at this and going, "Oh man, this is a complete disaster." Because I mean, okay, you did a public service by breaking down some of the crazy stuff that Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, is that her name, and Sidney Powell talked about. I mean, so if I can just read this, if you actually went to the trouble of diagramming the conspiracy, which makes no sense at all. Okay, so the Democrats paid the voting system company to flip X percentage of votes from Trump to Biden, of course, but they didn't do it for any other Democrats. Okay, so number 2, like the gang from Office Space, they put the decimal point in the wrong place, and so the number of votes changed were not enough to overwhelm Trump's landslide victory. So they're arguing not only that Trump won, but he won by a landslide. So the system was rigged, but it wasn't rigged quite enough. So 3, they had a backup fraud plan in case their payment to the voting system company didn't pan out. So thousands of fraudulent mail ballots were sent in, as shown by the fact that some of them were very neatly filled out and others were crammed in very messily. That proves the whole thing. This is further proven by the self-evident truth that obviously liberals cheat in something Hugo Chavez, which is actually, I think, a fair, good faith summary of how obviously nuts this was. So it was interesting that
it's CrowdStrike all over again.
It is the CrowdStrike Ukraine stuff, which is that if you actually break it down and try to chart out, you realize this is just insane. No rational person can do it, which is why a lot of Republicans, like the Josh Hawleys of the world, aren't really engaging with the same thing. Well, they're just asking questions. And if they're asking questions, isn't that legitimate to go through all of this? Which brings me all to something somewhat, this is a little bit man bites dog thing here. Tucker Carlson, and I want to go on record, not a fan of Tucker Carlson, goes on Fox News last night and eviscerates Sidney Powell. Now, I'm just trying to imagine being your average Fox News listener who, has been mainlining all of that grievance and victimization and Trumpiness for all this time, who has been regarding Fox News as the safe space where you go and you're not troubled by inconvenient fact checks. And you hear Tucker Carlson basically saying Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani are completely full of shit. Let's play it. It's about 3 minutes, and then I want to talk about it.
By former prosecutor Sidney Powell, who has also served as General Mike Flynn's lawyer. For more than a week, Powell has been all over conservative media with the following story. This election was stolen by a collection of international leftists who manipulated vote tabulating software in order to flip millions of votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. The other day on television, Powell said of Trump that when the fraud is finally uncovered, quote, "I think we'll find he had at least 80 million votes." In other words, rigged software stole about 7 million votes in this election. Here's some of what Powell said today about the software.
One of its most characteristic features is its ability to flip votes. It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm that had been plugged into the system. And that's what caused them to have to shut down in the states they shut down in.
That was a few hours ago, but Sidney Powell has been saying similar things for days. On Sunday night, we texted her after watching one of her segments. What Powell was describing would amount to the single greatest crime in American history. Millions of votes stolen in a day. Democracy destroyed. The end of our centuries-old system of self-government. Not a small thing. Now, to be perfectly clear, we did not dismiss any of it. We don't dismiss anything anymore, particularly when it's related to technology. We've talked to too many Silicon Valley whistleblowers. We've seen too much. After 4 years, this may be the single most open-minded show on television.
Oh, God.
There's evidence that a lot of things that responsible people used to dismiss out of hand as ridiculous are in fact real. And we don't care who mocks it.
Yeah.
The louder the Yale Political Science Department and the staff of the Atlantic magazine scream, "conspiracy theory," the more interested we tend to be. That's usually a sign you're over the target.
No.
A lot of people with impressive-sounding credentials in this country are frauds. They have no idea what they're doing. They're children posing as authorities, and when they're caught, they lie, and then they blame you for it. We see that every day. It's the central theme of this show, and will continue to be. So that's a long way of saying we took Sidney Powell seriously. We had no intention of fighting with her. We've always respected her work. We simply wanted to see the details. How could you not want to see them? So we invited Sidney Powell on the show. We would have given her the whole hour. We would have given her the entire week, actually, and listened quietly the whole time at rapt attention. That's a big story. But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page. When we kept pressing, she got angry and told us to stop contacting her. When we checked with others around the Trump campaign, people in positions of authority, they told us Powell has never given them any evidence either, nor did she provide any today at the press conference. Powell did say that electronic voting is dangerous, and she's right. We're with her there. But she never demonstrated that a single actual vote was moved illegitimately by software from one candidate to another. Not one.
Okay, so Tim Miller.
We'll take it, I guess.
Well, I guess I would in part take it, but I'm listening to that and going, okay, what is going on there? And you could tell that he's talked to other people in the Trump campaign who basically think Rudy Giuliani is just out of his freaking mind. And they had assembled a relatively middle grade, high powered legal team to deal with the election, and those people have been completely sidelined, and none of them were anywhere near the building yesterday. You notice that? So you got a sense that there are people in Trump world who are throwing Rudy under the bus, and you reflect that. But this is good news. But I don't want people to misunderstand it, because it's not going to stop this flood of bullshit, because Giuliani and his folks know that even the most bizarre lies are going to find an audience in the right wing's media ecosystem. And if people wanted Fox News to be a safe space and they hear that, a lot of them are just going to run over to One American Network, right? One American Network News, whatever, Newsmax, which are in this food fight to take over the audience and the ratings of Fox News, because they can be even Trumpier. So you're still going to have outlets that are going to push this. You're going to still see, flooding social media. And that's one of the real problems, is that you can basically throw out the craziest, nuttiest conspiracy theory, and you will be able to get millions of people who will hear it and will believe it.
Yeah, I want to. Here's the thing. I'm of two minds of this. One, it's good that Tucker is doing this. I need to take a shower after saying that. But Tucker has gained credibility with his audience through, as he said at great length, his extensive flirtation with conspiracy theories past, and his commitment to playing footsies with white nationalists, and being a populist, anti-establishment guy. He's gained credibility with his audience through that, and so him softly helping them off the ledge is a good thing. If that makes 100,000 less people think that our elections are fraudulently rigged by Venezuela, that's a net plus. So good on Tucker for that. Again, and my second thought is it also is crazy that Tucker's less scared of his audience than all these GOP senators are, some of whom who just got elected. Like, what is Tom Tillis worried about? He's not up again for 6 years. Why can't he just speak the truth?
Okay, by the
right?
way, this is an important point. So to Tucker Carlson, not a fan.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson actually showed more guts because he really could face real time blowback from his audience. He showed more guts than people who have a 6-year no cut contract. You've just been reelected to the United States Senate. You have nothing to worry about for the next 6 years, right?
Yeah,
This would be a
exactly.
perfect time to stand
Right.
up.
And so they could do the same thing that Tucker's doing. And this is the negative side of Tucker's doing. He has to do the absurd throat clearing about Yale and the Atlantic and all this nonsense about how terrible liberals
Elites.
are,
Yeah.
how conspiracies against elites are usually correct. Like, he's got to do all this nonsense before he gets to the point, which is like Sidney Powell's batshit crazy and has no proof for what she's saying. But Tom Tillis could do that too, right? I mean, Tucker just showed how low the courage bar is here. You can reaffirm how great Trump is and advance all these other insane conspiracies and still say, but like, okay, guys, this is a bridge too far. Like that is not too much to ask. And yet every GOP senator except Mitt and Ben Sasse has refused to take that path. Right, to me, I guess now, but he's out. He's not up for re-election.
Yeah, but he's still a senator, and he could do it. This. We keep coming back to this. That after yesterday's press conference, it did cross my mind because I'm incredibly naive and I'm loosey with the football and all of that. But thinking that if you're a Republican elected official, you watch that and you go, okay, you know what? I'm out. I'm going to go for the low hanging fruit here of saying let's respect the will of the people, a peaceful transition of power. Let's do all of those things, right? And yet 24 hours later, maybe a little bit of a trickle, but not much. And so the fact that we're sitting here and this is Friday morning, people will listen to this all weekend, so maybe you will know more about what's going on with the Michigan politicians. The fact that we are seriously talking about the possibility of the Republican Party declaring the vote of their own constituents to be null and void and doing something unprecedented, illegal, probably unconstitutional by just flipping their states and naming their elections. The fact that we're even talking about that is so insane, but it also shows what has happened to the Republican Party and their willingness to serve Donald Trump's whims. Because really, what is going on here is Donald Trump's petulant tantrum that he hates losing, can't acknowledge he's losing, is pretending he didn't lose, which is his psychological that's the Trumpian syndrome that somehow has infected the rest of the party. I mean, it's one thing. You've known people who are sore losers, right? Who I just don't want to come out of my room. I want to put my pillow over my head. That doesn't dictate, your life choices then for like the next 2 years, right? And yet the Republican Party is allowing itself to be held hostage by this guy's petulant tantrum. And it's amazing. It continues to be amazing. Even after all these years, it's amazing.
Yeah, they need a safe space. That's why this is why Newsmax and OAN are happening. They need a space that's even safer than Fox. Like, Fox isn't safe enough anymore. They don't want to hear anything that hurts their feelings. They don't want to hear any facts about the president's loss. It goes back to what I said earlier about the Obama apology tour. This was everything that conservatives railed against for my whole life. There were sore loser man bumper stickers. I mean, how much ink has been spilled on Ben Shapiro's website about safe space, facts don't let facts hurt your feelings, losers, millennial, campus culture.
It's not about your feelings. It's about that's true. I suppose that Ben has been tweeting out, right? I mean, that's his whole thing. Facts don't care about your feelings. And so suddenly that entire movement is we all care about Donald Trump's feelings in spite of the facts.
Exactly. That's what this is all about. I mean, it's really, when you step back and think about it, it's even crazier than it seems. That there's an entire political party, an entire Senate and House caucus who represent the people, who all of their highest and best goal is to protect the feelings of one guy who is a loser, who lost and who is going to have no power over them in 2 months. As far from a government standpoint, I think
Right.
that's what it comes down to. They're worried that he will still have a power over them by being able to sick his sycophants against them.
But the
But
longer they stick with him, the more likely it is that they will have to be cowering before his tweets.
it's the same
And
strategy as 2016.
well,
Like, we
it
saw how this didn't work.
yeah.
Nobody attacked him until the very end, right? And he gained strength, right? This was the same theory of the case as why he won the nomination in 2016 in the first place. And it's just deja vu all over again.
So let's assume that they're rational actors. And I talked with Brendan Buck, a mutual friend of ours, yesterday, and he's looking. It's a rational calculation because the base is completely behind Donald Trump right now. You could stand up and tell Trump to do the right thing. He's going to ignore you. He's not going to do the right thing. You will have accomplished nothing, and yet you will have unleashed, the flying monkeys, right at your, right at your throat. So it's a rational calculation, but that's the rational calculation that has gotten them into this corner. Look, there's a certain interest if you are a Republican and you want to think about the future and you want to run, for example, in 2024. If Donald Trump finally decides, okay, this was stolen from me, and continues to lie about the election and says he's running in 2024, he blocks the lane for everybody. You won't be able
Right.
to have an exploratory committee. You won't be able to put together a staff. You won't be able to raise money, right? I mean, he screwed the Republican Party for another 4 years if you do it. If you're Mike Pence, basically, you're done. I mean, that's I mean, he's probably done now. And yet none of them will take the easy step of saying, I'm sorry, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, but what the president's lawyers said yesterday is crazy, it's dangerous, it's damaging, I'm an American first, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't strike me as a hugely high risk thing to do right now at this moment.
Yeah, again, it's this game theory from 2016, right? Where had there been a collective effort to say, okay, we're all taking this guy out, right? Again, maybe that wouldn't have worked. Who knows? Maybe Trump had just tapped into something so deep seated in the base that there was no stopping him, and maybe it wouldn't work now. You don't know. I can understand at an individual level that everybody's individual calculation was why would I put my face out there, to get the tomatoes from all of the Trump fans, right? And so I do agree with Brendan on that it's an individual rational calculation, but that, I mean, as a group, they can't get together and just say this has gone on too far, right? I mean, they could,
Yeah.
and they would maybe take some heat, but again, it's hard to predict exactly how that would play out and what would happen. I think that would be also a rational action to say, let's try to get out from under this. But and I think maybe that was something they would do had they not won. And that's the other
Yeah.
thing, is that they all were reelected, and so I think that they all
That's the worst
basically
thing,
the
yeah.
lesson they got from the voters was, we punished him, not you, and
Okay,
so they're
yeah.
going to have to take some pain.
So here's some perhaps reassuring news. Tim Alberta from Politico is based in Michigan. He knows Michigan politics inside and out. This is his thing. Very smart guy, very wired in. He tweeted out just a few minutes ago, just FYI, after 48 hours of high-level conversations with Michigan R's and D's, it is clear the results will stand. Joe Biden will receive the state's 16 electoral votes. There is no alternative under Michigan statutes. This Trump-Michigan GOP meeting is a sideshow on par with Rudy's presser. Hope he's right about that. Okay, I have an interesting question to ask you,
All right.
Mr. Consultant. Okay, what should Joe Biden do now? At some point, do the Democrats have to be more proactive? How should they handle the not just the legal push, the attempt to delegitimize the election, but this incredible effort, I think, to make it impossible for Republicans to work with him, to demand that Republicans neuter a Biden presidency and render it almost completely null and void? Has Biden been aggressive enough, or has he brought a kumbaya to a knife fight?
Yeah, I think he's been fine. I understand the criticism of him that maybe they should be debunking this stuff more, but it's again, he won so clearly, that I think that they have the confidence that they are going to get in, and that this is a sideshow, and that the Republican let the Republicans burn themselves out over this. I think that if the threat level became a little greater, maybe the aggressive pushback would need to be there. But I think he's played this right. I think that, particularly if you look at the voters that he gained, that were these voters in the suburbs who voted for Republicans down ballot. He's going to want to keep those people in the coalition. I think playing nice right now, continuing to have this sort of kumbaya, as you say, message is good. And then I think that once he gets in there, the play for him is to make these Republicans put their money where their mouth is on populisty things, right? Big package of relief for COVID, the actual infrastructure week that never happened under the Trump, administration, minimum wage increase, right? I mean, there are 80% issues out there that are populist in a sense, that I think that he can lean into and just say, okay, if Mitch McConnell wants to block these populist things, then we'll put it back up to the voters again in 2022. I think that is a more likely for success play, given who Joe Biden is. Maybe the calculus would be different if Bernie had won, right? But given that who Joe Biden is, I think that is his best path towards actually getting a majority in 2022 and being able to do things with it.
Yeah. Okay. Before we wrap up, I just want to go back to a point you made before, because I wanted to underline it, because I've had the same thought over and over and over again, that we are so fortunate that this election was not closer. That the fact is that Joe Biden won decisively. He's going to win the popular vote by close to 7 million votes, more than 80 million votes. The margin in the states that he won, I mean, some of them are not massive, but they are clearly. They're not Florida 2000 level. We're not talking about 1,000 votes. The closest election, I think, is Arizona right now, which is about 10,000. Won Georgia again by about 14,000, more than 20,000 in Wisconsin. Don't know what the final Pennsylvania numbers will be, but there will be over 80,000, more than 140,000 in Michigan. Because you're right, if this had been closer and it had been in fewer states in play, I think that we are seeing exactly how it would have played out, and I think we would have had the full blown attempt to flip the election. There's no question about it. And I got to say that the dangerous precedent that's being set, because we keep moving the window of acceptable behavior, is don't be sure that it won't happen 4 years from now. Don't be sure that somebody in the future might not try these, since we have millions of voters who are apparently open to it.
This is why it's important that they stop it now, because not only will voters want it, they'll demand it.
Yeah, they will.
The voters are getting this expectation that if it is closer, that they will use every lever and cheat and steal to take this election. So yeah, and here's just to underline the point you made, because I've been trying to use this as shorthand for people. This is a bigger victory than 2000, obviously. Bigger than 2004 against John Kerry, which we don't look back at as a particularly close election. This is a bigger victory than 2012 over Obama's victory over Romney, and this is a bigger victory, obviously, in 2016. Same on the electoral vote side, but significantly bigger on the popular vote side, since Trump lost the popular vote side. So every election except 2008 of this century, including some that aren't really considered to be all that close. And so if with a victory that clear, they're trying to undermine the results. I mean, think about all the space between what we ended up with at 306 electoral votes and what it could have been.
No, and especially, and to your point about the expectations, the way we're seeing the political culture shift, all these Republicans who've now decided that graciously conceding is a sign of weakness. What a cuck you are if you do that. That somehow it is now the expectation that you fight and you scrap for every vote, by which they mean you fight and scrap to throw out as many votes as possible. That has been internalized. That is the expectation of what a fighter does. Okay, so my favorite thing, I got to throw this in at the end. The Dinesh D'Souza tweets today. Did you follow this at all?
No.
I love this. Okay, so it's basically everybody knows who Dinesh D'Souza is, and it's basically Rudy Giuliani Sidney Powell, and a few others versus a massive swarm on the other side. This is like the movie 300. A few Spartans in a narrow pass against tens of thousands of caterwauling Persians. My money is on the Spartans. Now, what's great for those of you who haven't seen it is the Spartans get wiped out in the end. They lose. It's the Battle of Thermopylae. And these guys keep doing these tweets about it's the Death Star. It's like, do you ever watch the end of the movies? Do you ever, before you use them? Like the Death Star gets blown up. The Spartans get wiped out, and yet they're still using them. I don't know. It's just,
the world ends, the world ends, the world ends. Not with a bang.
But with a wimpy tweet from Dinesh D'Souza. So, hey, Tim Miller, thank you so much for joining me and ending the week on what we're going to consider to be a high note, because next week's going to be better than this week, isn't it? All of these states are going to be certified, and we're all going to take a deep breath, right?
Your lips to Dominion's ears, Charlie.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening to today's Bulwark Podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back on Monday, and we will do this all over again.